I screwed up and 23 people had to get naked together as a result. A tale of plumbing and knowing your limits. Ever notice how expensive plumbers are? There's a reason for that. Cheap labor isn't skilled, and skilled labor isn't cheap. They're worth it. Let me tell you about one of my scars that constantly reminds me of this fact. I was barely 18, and my weirdo friends and I had just rented a city block of downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. 26,800 square feet of the most decrepit real estate in the industrial ghetto. It was an old, ugly, brick monstrosity that had a style all its own. We loved it. We were also young, inept, and dangerously naive. The last thing the landlord did after I signed my life away was to point at a hatch just inside the front door and say, "That's where the main water valve is," as he jogged, giggling, to his car and got out of there as fast as possible. The building had sat empty for well over a year, inhabited by a dozen homeless people who were burning barrels of trash for heat and using every nook and cranny as a toilet. Don't worry, they had used the toilets too. There were several of them scattered around the south end of the building across several floors. Every last one was a moldy heap of dried shit layered over a foot high above the seatless rim. How the duck do you even do that? I cannot imagine the thought process that leads someone to look at a toilet, with no water, no hope, and a bowl already full of a dozen other people's shit and say, "Yeah, there's room, I can do this." I don't know who you are, freak show champion vaulting shitter, but cheers to you, mate. I also knew that I would see you in hell before I was the one to clean those mother-ducking toilets. I grew up in farm country and I've mucked stalls with the best of 'em. I've experienced the warm joy of having a deluge of cow shit sprayed down my back in a milking parlor. I've cleaned plenty of toilets before, but this was a whole new level of shitpocalypse. I don't believe there's any job that's beneath me. But there was no way in hell I was going to clean those. If I had to handle it myself, I'd just bag and tag those duckers and toss them wholesale in a dumpster. But I knew what it cost to replace one, and I had to find a cheaper way. We had already run all the homeless guys out, so I had to do a little looking. It took perhaps 5 minutes. I found a little man in his 40s sitting under the back loading dock. He was literally in his 40s, he had a tiny fort of empty 40 Oz beer bottles that he had used to wall off the 2 open sides. "Want to make a couple of bucks?" I asked, as I knelt down and caught a glimpse inside. If he wanted privacy, he shouldn't have built a glass house. What? He said cautiously. I imagine his mind was going to dangerous and disgusting places already, but he certainly wasn't expecting what I was about to offer. "The toilets inside, I need someone to clean them. Do you want the job? What's it pay?" he said. I thought for a moment. I tried to imagine what it would take to compel me to undertake such a task. Tvec Biohazard 5-layer pressurized full bodysuit with a battery-powered ventilator, double nitrile gloves, layers of tape sealing, booties, boots, one of those big yellow city vacuum trucks they use for cleaning out storm drains, 500 gallons of bleach, 50 gallons of quaternary cleaner, $50,000 in my pocket, a bottle of the Balvenie, and a nymphomaniac midget to aid in my recovery from the mental trauma. "I'll give you $100 each. You little mother F you." "Sure, deal. When can you?" He was already moving and bounding through the loading dock door before I was even standing up. He walked through the back door, straight through the entire building, and right out the front door without saying a word or slowing down. He foraged perhaps 20 feet into the empty lot across the street and came back seconds later with an empty coffee can. He marched directly into the first bathroom, just off the lobby in the corner of the stairs, and with no gloves, no mask, no hesitation, and no fear used that rusty old coffee can to get a big scoop of dried human shit and carried it across the street into the field. I tried very hard to just keep lunch where it was intended, standing well away, and upwind as much as possible. I told him to holler at me when he was done and made sure to stay well to the other end of the building for the next few hours. I had to get this man some water, he was going to need it. I enlisted the help of a couple of the guys. We stationed one man on each floor. We had a foolproof plan. We were going to open a faucet in a sink or something on each floor. Then I would crack the main valve and slowly fill the system with water. Once the air had all vented out and the water was running smooth and clear, each person on each floor would close their valve and we'd be set. Easy, simple. I got this. I opened the old wooden hatch inside the front door. I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but a 2-foot wide hole, deep enough to stand waist deep in, that wasn't it. Deep, down inside, about a foot off the bottom, was a pair of valves with a meter in the middle. The pipe was massive. I was used to living in a house, with a main water feed that was perhaps an inch in diameter at most, usually 3/4 inch. This ducker was as thick as my arm. I hadn't yet learned that the building was originally a brewery a century ago. I gently and slowly opened the outer valve, upstream of the meter. It clicked a couple of times, but nothing scary happened. I opened it slowly, turn by turn until it gave me enough resistance to know I was all the way there. "Everyone ready?" I yelled up the stairs. Several shouts came back. It was time. It was also rigidly stuck. I turned it gently, it didn't budge. I tried harder, and the valve made it quite clear that my 130 pounds intellectual frame simply didn't have enough lead in my ass to make this happen. So, I hollered for Mikey. Mikey, well, he's a big sumbitch, and that's exactly the kind of guy the first needed at that moment. I showed him what was going on, and he laughed at me and hopped down in the hole. It held on his first attempt, so he tried again with 2 hands. I told him to hang on a second and I was going to let everyone know it was finally time, as we'd been screwing around for several minutes to get to this stage. I walked over to the stairs and gave a shout. Several bored and mildly irritated guys hollered back. "Go for it," I told him. And he did. Mike gave a grunt, the valve gave a snap, and he started cranking for Jesus. We heard the water flow in the pipes, the meter made a tika 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 sound and we just heard the quiet rushing of water for several seconds. We thought everything was working just fine. That's when the screaming started. A lot of screaming. From several people, on several floors, all at once. The unintelligible cacophony was immediately understood, and I shouted at Mikey to close the valve. He did, but not before the waterfall started to descend the staircase. It's like seeing your teacher at the grocery store dressed in leggings and a t-shirt. It's something you're totally familiar with, absolutely normal, and yet it just ducks with your head. I'm fine with water. I live in Michigan. Water is what we do. I've seen lakes, rivers, creeks, and even a waterfall or two. The stairs are groovy, seen tons of them. I can go up or down. I'm even okay with the spiral ones. Being a man of grace and poise, I have even accomplished the rare and difficult trick of falling up the stairs. Stairs and I go way back. But this was the only time I'd ever seen a waterfall cascading down a staircase. That's ducked up, man. I was not in any manner prepared for the sheer volume of water that came down the stairs. It was easily in the hundreds of gallons. It filled the valve hole, overran it, and poured out onto the sidewalk. It's okay, it's just a broken pipe, I can do this. I can fix this. I got this. So, we went to the hardware store, and I figured it out. Copper was the fancy stuff, that shit's expensive. Okay, so that's out. This white stuff though, PVC, is cheap. We can afford this. I had a long talk with the sales dude, and he taught me everything he knew about how to do plumbing with PVC pipe. It took about 5 minutes. I got a pile of pipe and fittings, and a can of glue, and all I needed was a tape measure and a hacksaw, and I already had both of those. We're set. We'll have working water in a couple of hours. Duckin' plumbers, what do they know? This isn't that hard. I'm a goddamn genius of plumbing. I thought to myself. The plumbing system for the building was super simple. The feed came into a bathroom on the ground floor, then passed by into the white room just behind it. That's where the one and only water heater was, a 50-gallon contraption that may have been there since Vietnam and made for the only part of the job I was scared of. Lighting the pilot on a water heater just puckers my ass and always has. But I'm a rugged man, a manly man, and I can light a water heater, damn it. The water heater's twin pipes, because now we have hot water, launched vertically up through the ceiling to the second floor. They just pass on through to the third, so that's easy. On 3 I had my apartment, kitchen sink, toilet, bathroom sink, and shower, done. It wasn't everything in the building, but it was enough to get started and establish basic life support. Also, I'd definitely run out of pipe by then, so it would have to do for now. Sure, all the pipe was exposed, just anchored to the brick wall. It may have looked like it was done by a one-armed blindfolded 12-year-old with ADHD while cranked out on meth. But it was done, and I did it. I was radiantly proud of myself. Duckin' plumbers, what do they know? We slowly turned on the water, and only had one leak. There was a spot where the plastic PVC pipe had to thread into the metal water heater, and it leaked like hell. Clearly, I hadn't gotten it tight enough. But now that it was all glued together, I can't turn the pipe. Okay. Cut the pipe with a hacksaw, then turn it. Glue in a coupling and it's all back together a few minutes later. Turn the water back on, and it leaks even worse. What the duck? Okay. Cut it apart again. This time we make a whole new end. Because it was getting short now, put it all back together, and bring it up slowly, no leaks. Success. It worked great, and I was thrilled. The stinking masses were thrilled too. Finally, we could have real showers. The warm glow of success lasted maybe 2 whole hours. But at least that was long enough to let Shay finish the toilets, and for that, we were all thankful. I gave the little ducker a $100 bill every time he started hollering and proudly showcased a clean toilet. By the end of the day, he'd made $500, and I never told him that it's a damn good thing we didn't have 6 toilets. I had about $40 left to my name. After he was done, we forced him to go get a cleaner, change of clothes and take a shower upstairs. He looked like the floor of a dairy barn that needed mucking. He didn't need a washcloth, he needed a squeegee and a pressure washer. He came down looking like a new man. Right about then was when the fountain started in the white room. The cold water line just launched right the duck off the top of the water heater, leaving the fitting still inside. I was a floor above it and heard something, followed by a lot of yelling. We got the water turned off and started fixing it. Again. Thankfully, the white room was empty except for the water heater off in the corner. It was about the size of a 2-car garage, with brick walls painted stark white, and a floor drain in the middle of the room. The mess wasn't a big deal to clean up. The good news was that we had enough parts to fix it. The bad news is, we didn't have enough parts to fix it properly. So now we only had water to one toilet, and the white room. The only running water in the building was the water heater itself, the lavatory sink for the bathroom next to it, and that one toilet. We had no money for more parts, and it was Saturday night. Even if we did have money for the parts we needed, nothing would be open for days. But we had a garden sprinkler. One of those with the arched bar about 1.5 feet long has a row of holes in it. They spray a fan of little streams that sways back and forth. We found it in one of the many random piles of debris left by a century of previous tenants, complete with about 20 feet of only a slightly crusty garden hose. This was a wonderful discovery because we quickly realized that the only hot water source we had in the building was the hose spigot on the bottom of the water heater. With a bit of nylon construction twine, we tied the sprinkler vertically to the steel support column in the middle of the white room, about 5 feet off the floor. The hose ran down and across the room to the water heater, which was now cranked up to somewhere between tea kettle and Saturn V. We could all get showers. But we only had about 10 minutes of hot water, with no temperature control, and it came from a sprinkler. The solution was simple. We all got naked. There comes a point when working together that you can all get so filthy, and everyone stinks so bad that you just don't give a duck anymore. Modesty goes right out the window, and nobody cares about dignity at all. Everyone stripped down right there and stood in a circle around the sprinkler. We opened the valve on the water heater and the sprinkler cracked to life, spraying a blast of water hot enough to fill the upper half of the room with steam in the first couple of minutes. We walked, slowly, around the pole like some strange naked pagan cleansing ritual and quickly worked out a system. You adjust the temperature by how close you stand to the sprinkler. You stand there, spin around a couple of times to get wet, and as you step out of the water the person ahead of you hands you the bottle of dish soap. It's what we had. Then the next person gets the sprinkler, while you soap up with a healthy handful of Palmolive for pots and pans, and once they step out of the water, you pass it to them. You scrub like hell, everywhere you can, as you walk around the circle. No sponge, no washcloths, and this ain't a loofah kind of place. You use your fingertips as God intended and try to scrub as much crud as you can. Eventually, right around the time you're freezing to death, about half dry, half crusty with soap, you get to the sprinkler again and rinse as much as you can. If you need, repeat the cycle. With this system, 23 highly motivated people can have a hot shower that's reasonably decent before the tank goes completely cold in about 9 or 10 minutes. If you just use the hose, and no sprinkler, the water goes cold in about 3 minutes, and then you're ducked. It worked surprisingly well, and we all got some hilarious memories from the week of sprinkler showers. There's no way you can endure such a thing and not get a few laughs out of it. I would not recommend this as a typical corporate team building exercise in today's world, however. It took a week to be able to get a couple of bucks for plumbing supplies, but I pulled it off eventually. I fixed the water heater connection and even built a proper shower in the white room and one on the second floor as well. With 3 separate showers, we were now living in luxury. We had hot and cold running water in the kitchen, and life was awesome. One nice aspect of abject poverty is that you quickly learn to appreciate the little things. Hot and cold running water that is clean and safe to drink is pretty damn awesome, and the overwhelming majority of people in America take this for granted every day. After a week or two, we did as well. Duckin' plumbers, what do they know? It was a beautiful June morning as dawn broke over the city. My gigantic arched top windows in what was now my 3rd-floor apartment were 4 feet wide and 12 feet high. They all faced south and west. With the sun itself blocked, dawn appeared as a wash of light crawling down from the west into the Grand River Valley and flooding the world with hope. I crawled down half awake from my pallet rack and plywood bed and stepped into the shower. I turned on the water and, in my zen state, eased into consciousness with wonderful hot water and a bottle of some random green Amway body wash that my girlfriend's parents had given me. All was good in my world. Then, I woke up, very cold, in an awkward position laying on the tile floor of my single-stall shower. There was a lot of blood everywhere. The water was spraying in a single giant stream like from a garden hose, straight from a hole in the wall where the shower head had been a moment ago. I hurt in places you don't even know you own, and I was somewhere between scared as hell and pissed right the duck off. I wasn't sure whether to cry or to kill the next mother ducker I saw with a clawhammer. Either option felt like a perfectly acceptable choice at that moment. I managed, with no small amount of difficulty, to stand up. I turned off the water, stepped out of the shower, and looked in the mirror. I looked like the drippings from a drunken duck. I was covered head to toe in goosebumps and way too much blood to be only mildly concerned. The shower looked like a Manson family Christmas special, and I had no idea just what the duck was going on. It took me a while to piece it together, but as near as I could figure out, this is what had happened. The shower head had exploded off the wall when the fitting broke where it turned horizontal from coming up the wall. The old metal shower head smacked me in the forehead, and it was either that or when the back of my head hit the wall when I fell down, that knocked me out. I was bleeding from both sides, so it's anyone's guess on the details. Duckin' plumbers, what do they know? They know that you have to use purple ducking primer when you glue PVC pipe together. Because the glue is a solvent, and while it can and does bond directly to the pipe, the joint won't last and can pop apart after a while if you don't use the purple primer to etch the smooth surface first to give the glue something to grab onto. They know that you have to use Teflon tape and pipe dope on threaded fittings, and which ones to use each for. They know 1,000 things that I didn't. It turns out that there's a lot more to being a plumber than just knowing that shit flows downhill, paydays on Friday, and, don't chew your fingernails. It took me a week's work, and another few $100, to tear apart the whole plumbing system and rebuild everything, this time with a primer on all the joints before I glued them. Still, none of it was anywhere near code, but it worked, and it got us through a couple of years until we could get the experienced help that we needed. I still have that scar on my forehead. It serves as my daily reminder that skilled labor isn't cheap, and cheap labor isn't skilled. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, HVAC techs, and all of the other skilled trades are far too often looked down upon in our society as idiots that didn't go to college. I want you to remember that the next time you're sitting there missing some manner of fundamental service in your life. When the heat won't work, you're sitting in the dark, or you're standing there ankle deep in shit. They're expensive because it's a hard job that pays well, you can't do it, and they're a hell of a lot smarter than you gave them credit for. They're worth it.
Like and subscribe for more ducking content.